Hello and welcome. My name is Kate. I'm from dailytarotgirl.com, and today I'm going to be chatting with Christiana Gaudet. She is a certified tarot grandmaster. She's been doing professional tarot readings since 1993, and she's the published author of two fantastic books on tarot, the Tarot Tour Guide and Fortune Stellar. And Fortune Stellar is an awesome book. I have that book, and it's all about what you need to know to start doing professional readings. So welcome to the show, Christiana. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
I have lots of really exciting, juicy questions that I want to ask you about tarot.
Okay.
And I can't wait to just pick your brain because I know that you're an amazing source of knowledge and information about tarot.
I'll try to.
So before I get into the questions, I just thought I'd ask you kind of what you're doing right now. I know you've got some blogs. I know you've got your radio or your sort of YouTube show. So I just thought maybe you could tell me a little bit about what you're up to right now.
Very good. Yeah, and I've got some very exciting things that I'll be unrolling hopefully in the next couple of months. I'm not going to talk about those, although I'm bursting with excitement. But let me tell you what I got going on right now. You mentioned my webcast. I do a weekly webcast, Christiana's Psychic Cafe. You've been a guest.
Yes.
And that's a lot of fun, and it does show up on YouTube, so you can watch it in the archives on YouTube. I've also started I'm getting more serious about having a YouTube channel. In fact, I'm borrowing a page from your notebook. And I'm doing a series of videos, answers to your questions about tarot. So if you have a question about tarot, you can email me, I'll make a video. And that's been really fun. I've gotten a much wider range of questions than I expected. People want my opinions on tarot decks and reading styles and what I think about individual cards and all kinds of stuff. So I have fun with that.
Yeah.
I do a weekly newsletter, and I've been doing this weekly newsletter for more than a year, and I just decided to give it an actual name. It's been the Tarot by Christiana newsletter for a long time. Now it is the Tarot Topics newsletter. And every week I do a one card reading for the week, like a tarot scope. I do an in-depth discussion of a particular tarot card. I'm going in order. I give a tarot spread or some fun exercise to do with the cards, along with what's going on the Psychic Cafe and my webinars, which is the other thing that I do.
Yes.
And if you want to receive my newsletter, all you have to do is sign up for it on my webpage. But my webinars are fun as well. I do a series of webinars. We have premium webinars that are all about tarot education, some for professional readers, some for beginners. And I also do free tarot webinars as well.
Awesome. So you're pretty busy.
I am, and none of that is counting my actual job, which is giving readings to people.
Right. So I have a question for you. It's something that I get asked all the time, and I always have a hard time answering it. And that is, how do you go about interpreting a tarot card in a specific position or as a response to a specific question? So if you're doing a reading for a friend, and say you're doing like a relationship reading and you get the death card, and maybe you know what the death card means, but you're not really sure how to interpret it in the context of the specific question being asked or in the context of the specific position that it's in a spread.
That is a fabulous question. I think this is the difference for a person when you're studying tarot, the difference between having a basic sense of understanding what the cards mean and putting them in positions and saying, okay, this card comes up in the past position. That means that in the past, this happened. You know, real basic stuff, and being able to weave it together and tell a story and get the cards to really speak. And you use the key word. The key word is context. And every time we say context, we have to say, Hail James Wells. Because, and you know, I think many of us really came to this, you know, you gotta let the card answer the question. But he was the one who gave me that beautiful word, context. That's what it is. It's all about context. And I remember years ago, teaching an adult education class and having a student come in who we'd just gone over the Celtic cross, and she had not had children. She was not looking to have children. And her crossing card, the biggest challenge, came up as the Page of Cups. And she said, how is a young child my biggest challenge? And we had to go into, again, context. Now, if she was trying to get pregnant, that might have been, it could have meant that. If she had a child that she was worried about, could have meant that. But none of those things were true. So I said, well, are you having any problem expressing your feelings? Because that can be the Page of Cups as well. And she said, yes, absolutely. That was the issue, fit in with the rest of the reading.
Yes.
And so, again, you have to let the card answer the question. So when you're talking about a position, each position is a question. And when you talk about a card can have many meanings. Now, you mentioned death coming up in a relationship reading. And that could mean a lot of interesting things. But it could signal the end of a relationship. It could signal taking a relationship to the next level.
Yeah.
I've seen that card come up in young people's readings, sort of first love things, when they've decided to, how do we say this delicately, when they've gone from holding hands to a more serious physical relationship.
Yeah.
The death card will come up. Also comes up for marriage, having a child. So if you see that in the context of a relationship, it would be sort of taking the next step, whatever that would be in the relationship.
Right. So here's my next question. I know that, tarot cards, like a particular tarot card can have, a bunch of different meanings. Like you just said, if you get the death card in a relationship meaning, it could mean this, or it could mean this, or it could mean this. So how do you determine, when you're doing a reading for someone else, how do you determine which meaning to go with? Like, do you like to interact with your client? Do you like to talk to them a lot and ask them questions? Or do you go purely on, intuition?
It depends entirely. When I first sit down to do a reading, assuming it's not like a 2-minute reading on the radio, but actually a 15-minute reading, an hour-long reading, a half-hour reading, something like that, I don't like to start with a question. I start with a large spread, an 11-card spread. And that has, it's a modified Celtic cross. That gives me a huge sense of who I'm reading for, who is this person, what's on their mind, what their questions are. Comes up right like that. Now, if I see a card that could mean a number of different things, and I always think about the court cards in that regard, because I feel like the court cards have the largest variety of specific meanings. Let's go back to that Page of Cups. That could be your kid. That could be you wanting a kid. That could be a message of love from someone who has passed on. That could be telling you that love is coming to your life. That could be telling you to express your emotions. That could be you going to school to study something that you love. All of those things are appropriate for the Page of Cups and more.
Right.
So how do you know which it is?
Yeah.
If you're doing a spread, you're going to look at the other cards around it. So if I saw other cards that talk about education, I might think it's about going to school. If I saw other cards that talk about communication, I might think it has to do with communication. If I see cards that talk about romance, I might think it has to do with love. If I see cards that have to do with grief, I might think it's a message from the other side.
Right.
Yeah. Now, the other piece of that, though, is it could mean all of the above or some combination thereof. So at that point, you're looking at intuition, what feels strongest. But here's a trick. If you really have no clue, if you're looking at the card, you're thinking of all the meanings and nothing is fitting, it works really well to say to the client, okay, here's this card. It could mean this, 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 and this. What resonates for you? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say all of the above. It's about all of those things.
Right.
Because I find, like, at least in how it works for me, if I'm not getting a specific hit in terms of the cards, and my intuition, then it's probably because it's all true.
Right.
And that throws people off, because if they're not getting that specific thing, that intuitive hit that happens, they think their intuition's not working.
Right.
And often the opposite is true. So much is true they can't get a direct hit.
Right.
So think about it that way.
Yeah. I like the way you put that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, you've been reading tarot for over 20 years?
That's correct.
Yeah. And professionally for over 20 years.
Well, professionally for 20 years, just, I should really count again. It's actually probably 21. I think it's 21 years, because I started in 1993.
Right, right. Okay, so as a professional reader, what do you find is your biggest challenge doing professional readings?
Okay, sure. There's a few things. Probably keeping to the appropriate time.
Yeah.
And, I'm better than I used to be, and I know 20 minutes, 15 minutes, half an hour, I can see it in my head, even if I don't have a clock. But I have a hard time. I can run over. That can happen. It doesn't happen often. It doesn't happen always. But trying to keep things on time is probably the hardest thing.
Yeah. I remember one time I was hired to do a tarot party at my friend's office, and everyone wanted 5-minute readings. So,
oh God, that's so hard.
And I was like, 5 minutes? Like what? And so I remember my friend had this little timer on her cell phone. And I would just start the 1-minute timer before the reading, and then, I would do it for 1 minute. And it's amazing how quickly I got really good at doing 1-minute readings.
You can do a lot in a minute. You really can.
Yeah.
But
I know you can't really take any questions from the person. It's just pull a card and,
right.
have verbal diarrhea for 60 seconds. But my next question is, when did you realize that you were ready to, step out from doing just readings for fun to doing professional paid readings with clients?
Sure, and that was so long ago, and I'm so comfortable in the work I do now. I forget that can be a very touchy situation for people. I think some people get out there too soon, and it freaks them out and scares them. Some people are afraid to get out. In fact, I had a student once who was at the time 70 years old. At the time, she had been reading tarot longer than I had, and she was still afraid to hang her shingle. Mm-hmm. And she was a good reader. Mm-hmm. So I think people are, I think most readers have a lot of integrity. And we're afraid of getting out before we're ready. We're afraid of steering people wrong. We're afraid we're not good enough. There's all kinds of stuff. Other people are just too brazen about it. They don't realize how serious it is, and they get out too soon. So how did I know when I was ready? And I think I got out at exactly the right time. I had been studying for 8 years. Mm-hmm. So how did I know I was ready? First, people sought me out for readings. My friends brought friends over. Hey, can you do this person's cards? People brought me gifts. They would knock on my door and have brownies. I brought these for you. Can we get out the cards and play with the cards? And I loved it. I always would. I remember my daughter at the time was probably 8. And maybe 9, something like that. And I remember her bringing her friends over with their parents' permission, can we play with the cards? Yeah. So people would constantly seek me out. So it was, in demand. Yeah. And people felt like they wanted to give me something in return. Mm-hmm. And then how it really happened was my boyfriend, who is now my husband, calls me up on a Friday and tells me he has booked me to read at a psychic fair the next day. Whoa. So I had no time to think about it. I just, okay, fine. I got up, I got dressed. He picked me up. I went to the psychic fair. I was terrified. What was I afraid of? Keeping reading short. Yeah. The pain of my career all the way through. Yeah. At that fair, readings were 15 minutes. I worked all day, and at the end of the day, I was so happy. I enjoyed it so much. I was so energized. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Nice. So what advice would you have for someone who wants to start doing readings professionally?
Well, there is that point where you have to get out. And like my first day as a reader, I wouldn't necessarily have pushed myself to do it. I needed someone who knew me, who believed in me to push myself, to push me. So, if you have those friends, those people who, when they think of tarot, they think of you, and you're not out reading professionally, they should be kicking your butt.
Yes.
So enlist the support of your friends.
Yes.
That's one, and get them to make you do it. It's like quitting smoking. You
Yeah.
gotta get friends to help you. There's that, and I think the practical piece of it is you must find a way to read for the public. You must find a way to read for people you don't know.
Right.
And that can be going to a nightclub or a restaurant, reading for tips, doing an art show, a street fair. Biddy Tarot does that wonderful free reading thing, where you can give free readings online.
Yeah.
I have friends who will just post on Facebook, okay, I'm giving away readings for the next hour, and let's do it. So find a way, whether it's in person or online, find a way to give it away for free or for tips.
Right.
That takes the pressure off. You can say, look, I'm a student, I'm just learning. And you can get them to talk to you that way. They're not going to give you that, that snotty, skeptical thing, like, I'm not going to tell you anything. They're not going to do that. If you tell them, I'm a student, work with me here, they will.
Yes.
And they'll be supportive and they'll feed back.
Yeah.
So, get out, or if you have a friend who can bring her friends that you don't know. And play with that, but don't get stuck doing that. The other thing I've seen is people have a transition problem, going from I'll read for you for free.
Yeah.
Now I'm a professional, and when you're ready. And once you go pro, here's the thing: I'm all about trading. I'm all about barter. But professionals get paid. Amateurs trade.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's an important distinction, and it is awkward when you've been giving free readings for years and then you go professional. And for me, I found that my friends stopped asking me for readings as soon as I went professional, and so I thought that was interesting. But I really liked what you said about your friends and family being the ones to kind of support you and kind of push you out there, because I know that's how I got started. It was actually kind of a friend of a friend found out that I did tarot, and she said, why don't you do a tarot party? I'm having a party at my place, come and do readings. And at the time I didn't feel comfortable charging because I'd never done professional readings, never done a tarot party or anything like that. So I went and I did it, and of course my big challenge was the timing, and I was supposed to do 15-minute readings for everyone, and sometimes they went on for like an hour, which was really awkward. And I remember I had one woman who was really not happy with her reading and did not have a problem letting me know about it. And I just remember she was a little, I think she was a little bit nuts actually, looking back on it. And so she was kind of rude and she stomped off. And normally something like that would like totally make me feel ill. Like I'd want to vomit, I'd be like, oh no, someone doesn't like me. But I just totally like put it out of my mind. I did the next reading for someone else, and I didn't give that any thought. And I was like, okay, now I know I'm ready to branch out and start, doing professional readings, because I know that I'm not as sensitive as I once was. And, I'm confident enough in my abilities that someone else's negative opinion isn't gonna, throw me off and make me want to stop reading tarot forever.
I have, this is actually someone else's story, very similar to this. And I'll tell it, and I'll even give you the name. She's in the community. If you don't know her, I know she won't mind me telling her this story. Her name is Marcy Courier.
Yeah.
Wonderful reader, just beautiful, beautiful human being. She's been a student, a friend, a colleague, and I sort of brought her out professionally, trial by fire. Safe graduations, project graduation. Graduation night, they lock the kids in like a big gymnasium or something, and they have food and dancing and entertainment all night long. Well, what could be more entertaining for a high school graduate than tarot reading? So they needed 2 readers. I called Marcy. She was my student. I was like, yeah, Marcy, you ready for this? So her trial by fire, graduating seniors, 3 o'clock in the morning in the bowling center at the sub base,
Yeah.
because that's where the party was being held. And we're on 2 high top tables with all of these kids milling around, and we're doing the readings, and I can keep an eye on her. I can see she's doing okay. And then I see she has one of the chaperones. And the chaperone is a very lovely lady who's kind of doing, the look,
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I can see Marcy's face, and Marcy's holding it together, she's cool even then. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to get this one. Okay, so woman leaves the line. I see her in my line. She gets to my table and she says, well, I hope you're better than that other girl. That other girl didn't know what she's talking about. I'm thinking, oh, poor Marcy. But again, Marcy is my student. I'm thinking, have I misjudged? Does Marcy suck? And I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
So I lay out these women's cards and I start talking and I get the same facial expressions, the same body language. Now, not only is Marcy full of shit, apparently I am too. So the woman now stalks off from both of our tables.
Yeah.
Marcy and I drive home together afterwards, and she's like, what was up with that woman? We told her, and we couldn't hear, it was loud. We couldn't hear each other. We told her exactly the same story that she denied from both of us. And, here I am, a seasoned reader. I'm okay with it. Marcy is brand new at this point. And so the moral of the story, new readers, yes, you can be wrong, but you might not be.
Right.
And this was a case where it was very clear.
Yeah. I love that story. And the funny thing is, like, I've had readings, tarot readings, psychic readings, palm readings, and the reader will say something that doesn't make sense to me, but I'll, write it down or I'll have recorded the reading and I'll listen like 2 years later. And I was like, oh, that makes total sense now. Whereas at the time, it didn't. And I probably said, oh, that doesn't really resonate. It doesn't make sense. But, later on down the road, it does. So my next question for you is, what advice would you have for someone who's just getting into tarot and they're just starting to, learn the meanings? Because I know for me, and I know for other people who are learning, it can be really overwhelming because tarot, has so many layers to it. There's the meanings, there's spreads, there's intuition, there's, all, court cards, everything. So what advice would you have for someone who's just getting into tarot?
Sure. Choose your first deck, not necessarily based on the pretty pictures. And people say, oh, choose what resonates for you. A brand new person is not necessarily going to have a sense of that. Different decks have different traditions behind them. And so, if I'm a weight reader.
Yeah.
I work with a lot of different decks, but they all have a basic weight tradition.
Yes.
If you start with a Marseille deck, that's the tradition you're going to learn. If you start with a Crowley deck, that's the tradition you're going to learn. If you start with a weight deck, that's the tradition you're going to learn. If you start with a different deck than that, it's going to honor one of those traditions or be its own thing.
Yeah.
Be clear on what you're doing that way. Because if you're reading a book that's about a weight deck and you're looking at a Crowley deck, you're going to go crazy right there and then.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't realize that there are those different traditions. So like I learned on a weight deck, and I always, when people ask me, what deck should I start with, I always say get the Rider Waite deck, because most other decks are kind of a variation on that theme. But then there's also the Marseille deck, which I'm actually not really familiar with, like I haven't studied it. And then there's the Thoth deck, which I am familiar with, and it's different.
Significantly different. In its own right. Weight is the most popular deck on the planet. Crowley, Thoth, the second most popular.
Yeah.
There's a reason. Now, those two decks, of course, are kind of, they have things in common. And one thing I do, I have studied the Crowley tradition enough to use Crowley keywords my weight deck. And that has been fabulous. It's opened a lot of doors. But I'm jumping ahead. So, take some care in picking your deck and don't just make it be about pretty pictures.
Right.
Number,
Yeah.
number two, recognize that even before you memorize the card, even before you learn anything about the cards, having tarot in your life is a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Play with them, have fun with them, enjoy the pictures, recognize that this is a journey. At the same time, do not be afraid of the memorization. I get really tired of people saying, oh, you don't need to memorize anything. I think there's real value to memorization.
Mm-hmm.
I really do, because then it's on call.
Mm-hmm.
Intuition works best when your memory is on call. I mean, did you have to memorize your name? At some point in your life you did, but now you know it.
Right. Yeah.
Tarot is like that.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing the tarot cards is like knowing your friends.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta know them.
Yeah.
But you can have fun with it from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
How's that?
I like that. I like that. And what you said about learning the card meanings reminds me of when I was studying dance. Like we were told, you have to learn the basic, boring dance steps. You have to master that. So then you can break the rules and do your own thing. But you have to do the kind of the basic structure stuff first, right?
That is so true. And in fact, I have a very similar story. I took a class in modern creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
The first lesson was to write a traditional Elizabethan sonnet.
Mm-hmm.
For exactly the same reason. If you want to break
Yeah.
the rules, you know the rules first.
Right. Good. I like that. So my next question for you is I had a peek at your website and it sounds like you read in all these like crazy places. You've done readings at the military base. You do readings in nightclubs, parties, polyamorous community festivals. I really want to hear about that. What that was like.
I will tell you about that. I'll
Okay.
tell you about that one. Well, let's see. I am, as you say, I am very into bringing tarot to places where tarot wouldn't normally be.
Right.
The longer that I do this, the less easy that is to do, because tarot over the past, thank you, Mary Greer, thank you, Eden Gray, thank you, Rachel Pollack, because of all of those people and people in my generation, me, Teresa Reed, I mean, there's a lot of us. We have been bringing tarot out into the world, and so now it is out in the world. And, there's a whole new younger generation of people doing it like you, and that's a fabulous thing. So I've always been about making tarot more accessible and more acceptable, right?
Yeah.
So I've taken it to a lot of places, Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary, all kinds of places where you might not expect it, churches, all kinds of things. Okay, festivals. I love festivals. I love festivals of all kinds. I love music festivals. I love pagan festivals. And the whole polyamorous thing was sort of it was a pagan festival. And I've done a couple of them, but they've all been pagan spiritual festivals that cater to the clothing optional and polyamorous community. And those communities are not the same, but there's overlap.
Right.
And so I happened to see that there was such a festival fairly near me, and I contacted them and I said, okay, I'll do a workshop on sex and the tarot.
Oh. Yeah.
And they accepted my workshop, and I did.
Yeah.
I did. And it was a fun festival, and I did some readings. And, the thing about reading for the polyamorous community, we do a lot of relationship readings everywhere we go, right?
I was going to say, they must be different, right?
It's expanded. It's expanded. Because we think about relationship very clearly as two people. Now, I'm a very inclusive reader. So when I think about relationship as two people, I don't necessarily think male-female.
Right.
Two females, two men. And those readings have their own nuances because there's those communities. Okay, polyamorous community. Assume nothing. Every relationship is different, yes.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about polyamorous, okay, perhaps I'm reading for a married couple, male, female, and they're male, colored, submissive,
Hmm. Right.
and the three of them are together.
Hmm.
Or perhaps I'm reading for three women that are all together and they live together and they're together,
Right.
and that's what they do.
Right.
I have seen it all. And this is what I can tell you. Relationships are relationships are relationships. It's about communication.
Right.
It's about trust.
Mhm.
It's about everybody being on the same page.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how many people or what their gender or what the dynamic of the relationship is, as long as they all know what the dynamic is.
Right. Right.
You know?
So did you find you got kind of the same sort of questions from the people in the polyamorous community than you would people in sort of, um, you know,
Yes and no. I
mhm.
mean, you don't out in the regular world, you don't often get questions about, okay, I'm reading for the husband and wife, and the wife wants is asking in genuine concern about the husband's girlfriend's husband
Right.
who's having a health issue and is asking with genuine concern and love.
Right.
You
Mhm.
know, you don't get that all the time.
Right.
But that's the bottom line is, love is love.
Mhm.
And what I learned from working with the polyamorous community, it's more complex. They have more people they have to deal with.
Mhm.
And there are, whole other questions and questions about rules and questions about, what happens when you're in a triple.
Mhm.
And two people in the triple can't deal with each other anymore, but that other person, they still want to be together. And how do you navigate that?
Mhm.
That is a huge one that comes up a lot.
Right.
Because, when you're a couple and you break up, that's a breakup.
Right.
But when you're a triple or a quad
Right.
and you break up, not
Way
everybody,
messier, I would think.
it can be really painful. It
Yeah.
can be really, really painful.
Mhm.
And I've, to this day, find myself, some of my clients are these family groups.
Mhm.
And I will have to go in and really help them figure out what their new boundaries are going to be.
Right, right. Yeah. That's fascinating. I mean, you must really have to, well, you seem like a totally non-judgmental person, but you must, even then, you still must have to kind of, um, really kind of open your mind to, different possibilities and things like that.
Yes. I'm just thinking, and there are some that are so unique, I won't tell you about them because they're so unique,
Right.
they would,
Right,
and I
right.
don't want to break any confidentialities.
Yeah.
But, the bottom line, it all comes down to love is love,
Hmm. Right.
and I think as tarot readers, we have to be really careful about judgment anyway.
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's not hard to be non-judgmental when you're talking about polyamory because it's all about honesty.
Right.
Everyone has to be honest about their feelings or
Hmm.
it's not going to work.
Right, right. Yeah.
Um, it's harder, when I'm in a situation out in the mundane world
Hmm.
where I'm reading for someone who is cheating.
Hmm.
And again, you can't be judgmental. It
Hmm.
happens, and it happens for a million reasons.
Hmm.
Sometimes it just happens because a person is selfish and doesn't care.
Hmm. Right.
And that's a harder reading to
Yeah.
do, and you run into those everywhere.
I feel like you almost have to be like a counselor when you're a tarot reader. Like I think I've done counseling and tarot reading, and I feel like there's so much overlap between the two. It's really interesting.
There is, and I've been in the position, and in fact, currently am in the position where I have clients who are also in counseling, in therapy, seeing all manner of psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, therapists, mental health workers.
Hmm.
And I will often be in a position where I will work directly with the mental health worker and,
Hmm.
with the position of
Oh
the
wow.
client. We'll
Yeah.
talk
Yeah.
and say, okay, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Or I will, we'll check in through the client
Hmm.
where the psychiatrist will say, well, what did Christiana say?
Hmm.
And I'll say, what did the doctor say? And
Yeah.
we'll make sure that we're all on the same page. We
Right.
usually are.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. So do you find that people in the medical community and mental health community are quite accepting of tarot readers and what you do?
In, in general, no.
Okay.
But, if you're good at what you do, you can be in any crazy field. You
Hmm.
can look any crazy way.
Yeah,
And if you're good at what you do, eventually that's your merit.
right.
And so I am sure that these particular doctors that I end up dealing with are not all about tarot readers.
Hmm.
But I'm sure when their patients come in and say, well, I got to tell you, I talked to this woman and she reads tarot cards. I know you think it's crazy, but this is what she says, and this is what she says.
Hmm.
What do you think about it? An honest doctor, if they
Hmm.
agree, is going to agree. And over
Right.
time, trust is built.
Right, right. Interesting. So my last question for you is, um, and I know this kind of depends on where in the world you live, but I hear from a lot of people who live in a family or, a town or city where tarot reading is still seen as kind of a negative thing. Like not everyone is really accepting and open-minded towards it.
Sure.
Um, so I was lucky in that everyone in my family is pretty laid back and I do all kinds of weird stuff and weird like read weird books and do weird courses and and everyone in my family is just like, oh, whatever, like everyone's pretty accepting. But I know there's a lot of people whose families are not that way and they um are maybe even scared that one of their family members is getting into tarot and everything. So, what advice would you have for someone who's in that situation where they're getting into tarot, they love tarot, but their partner or friends or family is not supportive of it?
Well, there's a couple of reasons that people might not support it.
Hmm.
One is simply that they poo-poo it. They don't see it as harmful or damaging. They just see it as silly.
Hmm.
And those people are easy to win over time
Hmm.
because if you're near it over time, I mean, I thought it was silly at one time.
Hmm. Yeah,
I thought it was ridiculous to think that divination would work in this way, and yet it does.
yeah.
So those people, you just have to put up with the teasing, and it's no big deal
Hmm.
because over time they'll learn.
Right.
The harder ones are the people who have a religious objection to it. The people who believe that it is spiritually harmful,
Hmm.
the people who believe that it is controlled by or inviting to a negative spiritual force like the devil.
Right.
And I was very lucky to not grow up with that. Although I am the daughter of a Methodist minister, he didn't do the devil,
Hmm.
He's, definitely much more new thought.
Right.
And And so the people who grew up in these very restrictive environments or who are around people who believe that, you know, that school of thought can be so damaging in so many ways.
Hmm. Yeah.
And, I went to a born again Christian school back in the 1970s.
Hmm.
And that was, the movement has changed over time.
Hmm.
At that point, it was much more loving. It was much more open. It was about the joy of the Lord, and it was a beautiful thing.
Hmm.
Over time, it's gotten so much more hateful.
Hmm.
And I suppose in the Bible Belt, maybe it was always like that. I don't know. I'm from the East Coast.
Right.
So I have a lot of compassion for people who see God as the angry sky daddy and who feel that they're going to be punished. And if they feel they're going to be punished for tarot, they feel they're going to be punished for a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
So if you have found your way to tarot and you come from that kind of a background, you have other issues too.
Hmm. Right.
And the key is to understand what those issues are and to really use the cards to find your healing.
Hmm.
And in terms of dealing with your family or with your community who may fully be afraid for you, afraid for your mortal soul, and afraid that they themselves will burn in hell if they cannot get you to give up your pernicious activities,
Right.
if that's what you're dealing with, I would just say come to a place in your heart where you understand that higher power loves you and higher power gives us tools
Yeah.
that help us. And tarot is one of those tools.
Mm-hmm.
And just try to reflect love in all that you do,
Right.
and when people come at you with angry spirituality, reflect love back and don't let any of that judgment get next to you.
Right. Yeah. Good advice. Thank you. That was wonderful. That was a wonderfully deep answer to that question.
Well, it's a hard one. I have so rarely received that kind of discrimination
Hmm.
myself
Yeah.
that I'm surprised every time it happens.
Hmm.
And it's happened recently in a way that puts someone, it happened in business in a way that puts someone in an actionable position legally.
Hmm.
And I had a lot of people encouraging me to sue this person, and I chose not to be litigious.
Yeah.
And it was probably an open and closed case, an open and shut case, and I probably walked away from money on the table with that one.
Right.
But at the end of the day, there's a part of me that feels like there have to be people in the community who will stand up, who will take people to court, who will fight for our rights in that way.
Right.
And I'm not necessarily that person.
Right.
I'll win souls for sanity in other ways,
Hmm.
but I just, at the end of the day, I have compassion for people who have to believe in that kind of black and white way.
Right.
Otherwise, intelligent people.
Hmm. Yeah.
I can understand it.
Hmm.
And at the end of the day, I feel sorry for them, too sorry for them to take their money.
Right. Right. Well, good for you because I mean it does require, investing a lot of energy and time that into something that, might not be very fulfilling for you in the end.
I would rather spend time. I've got so many projects. I'm working on new books. I would rather spend my time and energy doing that, and I'd rather make my money that way.
Right, right. So very last question for you is, um, what is your sort of um, underlying goal or mission with tarot? Like you're teaching tarot, you're doing readings, you're sharing it with people. But what is your underlying sort of why? The reason why tarot and why do you want to bring more accessibility to tarot?
Wow. Well, I think, one of the things we have to think about is tarot is very young.
Hmm.
In fact, tonight I'm teaching a class on the I Ching.
Mm.
I
Yeah,
Ching is 5,000 years old.
yeah,
Tarot, 500 years old.
yeah.
When we look at history in the long run,
Hmm.
we are still developing tarot.
Yeah,
And you and I and everyone who puts their hands on the cards, we are still part of the people who are evolving it and forming it. And that's a beautiful thing. So to be part of its evolution, and perhaps it will always be evolving. That's a wonderful thing too.
yeah.
I think that tarot is so special to me
Hmm.
as a book of spiritual wisdom, as a set of magical tools, as a tool of random token divination, as a special kind of art, as a language, as a way to communicate. Tarot is so many things and it's so special. And in that, I don't think there's anything like it on the planet.
Right.
It is so unique. And I want to share that with people. And I am so honored and I'm so grateful that this can be my career, that
Hmm.
I can have a career about which I am so amazingly passionate, where I'm never bored, where I'm always happy. And tarot allows us to help people. Sure, it's entertaining. And if I can provide you entertainment at your corporate party, that is my great
Right.
pleasure. Tarot is entertaining.
Yeah.
But if I can sit with you for an hour and really help you work through some stuff,
Hmm.
I love being able
Yeah.
to do that. And I love the people I connect with when I do that. So why not tarot? For
Right.
all of those reasons and more.
Yes. I love your enthusiasm over tarot. Because tarot, I feel like it is one of those things that it has so many different facets. There's so much you can do with it. It's not just about reading specifically. I mean, you can do creative writing with tarot. You can be artistically inspired by it. You can use it for, like you mentioned, healing. You can meditate with your cards. I mean, there's so many different levels to working with tarot. And I think we already discussed this earlier, but I always think of tarot as like, an onion, like when you can peel layers back, there's so many layers to it.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
There really are. And what if we're just discussing it? I mean, within our lifetime, tarot became, sort of accessible to everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
It used to
Yeah.
be just for the very select few, and it was extremely occult.
Yeah.
Now it's becoming kind of everywhere.
Hmm.
And you think, what next?
Yeah.
You know,
And I
where
always
next?
I always wondered if like as soon as I got into tarot, I started noticing it everywhere, and I didn't know if that was just because I was into it now, or if tarot really is like exploding and becoming more mainstream than it has been in the past.
I would say both.
Hmm.
Both.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Well, Christiana, I want to thank you so much for being a guest and answering my questions. You're just a wealth of information, and I encourage everyone to check out your website, which is, what's it called again?
It is tarotbychristiana.com. And on the
Great.
website, you'll see links. I have like 22 websites. I really do. And one of my new projects coming up very soon is rolling out a brand new website design. So that'll be up pretty soon. But if you go to my main website, tarotbychristiana.com, you'll see links to my 4 blogs. You'll see links to my community blog where some of my students and friends share their thoughts. You'll see links to my archives for the Psychic Cafe and my newsletter. You'll see my webinars. You'll see my 78 poems tarot project. I'm writing one poem for each of the 78 tarot
Oh,
cards.
wow. Wow. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm,
it's not
I'm
good poetry. I'm not a good poet, but I'm doing it.
So I'll put the link to your website. If you're watching this on YouTube, the link is going to be in the About section of this video. If you're watching on my website, I'll just post the link on just beneath the video so you can check out Christiana's site. So thank you again, Christiana, for answering my questions and sharing your wisdom with everyone. So best of luck to you.
Thank you
Okay.
so much, and thank you for being the next generation of tarot.
Oh,
Really,
thank
it's
you.
amazing to see some of the younger people coming up and all the great things you're doing, and I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Thank you. Okay, goodbye.